Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the third day of the Mid-Atlantic Air Museum's World War II weekend. Happy to see you all back, and if you're here for the first time, welcome. Very pleased to introduce our first guest speaker for today, Mr. Herbert Ridyard. Just very briefly, Herbert served in Patton's 3rd Army, 94th Infantry Division, 301st Infantry, H Company, in Europe, and he can tell you much more about that in more detail than I can. So, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Herbert Ridyard.
Thank you. I thought we could start off with a song. You guys all know God Bless America? Yeah, we do that. You don't have to stand up for that, right? But when you sing it, you got to do it like Kate Smith. You heavy emphasis on the bless, okay? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the ocean white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Thank you. All right, I don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on who I am. You heard what I was 17 when I enlisted. I lived in Bethlehem, but I went to Allentown to enlist where the recruitment office was. We had been interviewed at our high school by the Army, Navy, and the Marines. And it was a chance to go to college, something called the Army Specialized Training Program. So I joined that, and Dad worked in the Bethlehem Steel, was never going to get to go to work, go to school, paying for it. So the Army was going to take care. Well, anyway, to do that, you had to enlist. I weighed 121 pounds, skinny as a rail. The doctor looked at me and said, "You really want to do this?" And I said, "Yes." One of the best decisions I ever made. They sent me to Camp Hood, Texas for basic training. And there, exercise every day, out in the sun, working, I gained 15 pounds. And when I was done after 13 weeks, I could do anything that the military wanted me to do. I didn't know I had stamina. I learned that. 5-mile hike, 10-mile hike, 20-mile hike. Bloody toes, keep going. I learned something about myself. So that was a wonderful experience. And number one thing about the Army that helped me with, that I got out of it, was physically fit. I only was 135 pounds when I went overseas, but that was enough. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward the fact that I did go to University of Virginia for a very short time, and they killed the whole program. They sent 200,000 18-year-olds to the infantry. Went to Camp McCain, Mississippi, and now I trained with a unit. And I was in the H Company, which is a heavy weapons company. They just sprinkle us throughout the division, just random. And that's where I ended up. So, got a machine gun squad. I was a number 3 guy. We had only 6 guys plus a Jeep driver. The first guy is your squad leader, so that was John Lyons, and we had 2 gunners. The first gunner, he carries the tripod. The second gunner carries the machine gun. The first gunner puts the tripod down, sits behind it, and the gunner puts the gun on top, and I'm the third man with ammunition. Believe it or not, we had pack frames. So there was 3 of us with a couple of cans of machine gun ammunition, and we carried a light rifle, the M1 carbine, because we had all this other stuff to cover. Well, anyway, that's enough background. We did get overseas, and we didn't get there till D+94, which is kind of a unique thing. Sent us to Lorient and Saint-Nazaire. They're two submarine ports on the Atlantic coast, province of Brittany. Still hedgerow country. Outside it, there's nothing but apple trees. So there we were, containing 60,000 Germans in those two ports. They had 35 battalions of artillery that retreated in there. They didn't want anybody getting those submarine ports. It's 15,000 of us. The captain says, we're not going in after them. So it turns out for 4 months, the rifle companies did patrols and so forth. They got into skirmishes, but the heavy weapons guys, we just dug holes. And I think after it was all over, there's only 100 killed, a couple hundred wounded, so forth. However, the very first day, I was almost a casualty. I happened to be in company reserve, and September night, it's a hedgerow over here with a slit trench. I thought, well, if something happens, that's where I'll go. By the way, can you hear in the back? Okay. So I lay down on my blankets, and no sooner did I do that than the German artillery started plastering the place. I flew into that slit trench, tried to climb inside my helmet. I was so scared, it was just unbelievable. I was praying to God to save me, save me, save me. Do anything if it just saved me. Well, turns out that happened. I got through that okay. But from then on, there's something called fear. Every breathing, living minute, fear for months. And I think out of that prayer, I got courage. I was able to do whatever somebody asked me to do on the front line, and I lived through it. So I got through that. That's another thing I got out of it, was courage at that point. Okay, now we have to fast forward, because we were there 4 months, and then they shipped us, the Battle of Bulge started. You all know, started on the 16th of December. By the 28th, we had stopped them. We lost 5,000 dead doing that. But then it took, from then to the 28th of January, to push them back. Another 15,000 Americans died doing that. We were not relieved and sent there until the very first day of January. It was a really cold winter, and at some point they put us on trucks, and we went for 13 hours in an open truck with no stopping and no lights. It was such a critical time. We just shot the bull for a while, but then as dark came, we went past the Verdun gigantic cemetery. That was not a good sign to see. And later on, we saw a row of body bags, about 40 of them, double layered. We don't know whether they're German or Americans, but going into combat, you don't want to see those kind of things. We did end up in a little village near the Siegfried Line. Now this is just below Luxembourg. All right, so the Siegfried Line there is maybe 2 to 3 miles wide, full of little villages. In between the villages are minefields and bunkers, concrete bunkers for the Germans. The soldiers in those villages take turns manning those around the clock. In front is 10-foot tank ditch, and behind that are these concrete pillars. They're tank traps. So this is what we were up against. I'm not going to review that because I got to get to my story, but for the first couple of weeks, we were restricted to battalion-sized attacks because the bulge was going on and they didn't want us to get too involved. But our general decided, well, we have one battalion attack today and another battalion tomorrow and another one the third day. So that's how it was done. And we started picking up those villages. And after about 5 of those, the Germans called for help. They had counterattack many times. They lost. So our guys just mowed them down. It's maybe their first real battle they were in, when they mowed Germans. A battalion of Germans attacked. They They got 300 of them. So this just went on. And then the Germans got a Panzer division coming by, and they sent a unit, and they took back half of those villages. And right after that, we got the 8th Armored. They never saw combat before, but they sent a unit of those with us for 2 days, 48 hours. We took it all back, and then they left us, and they had to stop. So that's when our battalion started to take the next village. It was called Sins, S-I-N-Z, kind of a foreboding name. So we couldn't do any maneuvering in the daytime because the Germans had the high ground. So at nighttime, we set off on a snowy night. It actually was a lovely night if you weren't in this situation. As we hiked into this one village that had been captured, and we saw all these battle-scarred buildings. We turned the corner, and there were a dozen German bodies lying there from some counterattack. We went over through the snow-covered fields and into a wooded area. On the way up there, it was a little harder to hike with this ammunition on my back. I try not to trip because there's branches under the snow. Anyway, I fell. And when I got up, I had kind of accidentally brushed the snow off a dead German body. That was, for a 19-year-old, that was quite a shock. But you had to soldier on and keep going. So we got to the front of the woods, and we found somebody already dug some neat foxholes there. Not really foxholes, but they're holes. There was 2 of them, big enough for 4 guys in each, covered with logs. And we had our machine guns set up near the ends of those, and with 2 guys on guard and 4 in the hole, round the clock, we were able to do that. All right, so guard duty in the cold. It's freezing, it's really scary, and it's boring. Stand there for 2 hours. I used to count to 100 over and over again to pass the time. You know, the whole time we're scanning back and forth, trying to keep guard over our buddies who might be sleeping. One night I got kind of feeling sorry for myself, and I kept thinking, how is it that Mrs. Ridyard's baby, I'm the baby of the family, how comes that Mrs. Ridyard's little boy Herbert is on the front line? There's Germans there and nobody else. We saw nobody in the daytime. There's 13 million or maybe 16 million servicemen. Where are they all? There's 12 of us on this hill. And it's not a good feeling. So that's kind of the way I felt. So anyway, they felt sorry for us. That's 15 minutes gone? No. 5? No. This is going to be tough. Is there truly 5 more? Just got started. What? 15 months. That's what I thought. All right, so they started sending us back one at a time. The company headquarters for a night to get in. And when my term came, I got back there to the first sergeant and said, "You're getting a break. You're going for a 48-hour rest." So I jumped on a truck with some other guys. We went to this place, and they took us in a tent, big as this, but it had sides. First shower, only shower in 8 months was in that tent. They dusted us with DDT and gave us a clean uniform, and we slept 2 nights on a cot, which wasn't comfortable because we used to. We spent a whole winter outside, and we're lying on the ground wherever we can. But biggest meal I ever had. It was a wonderful experience. Haircut, shaved, next day back on the line, and just to find out that G Company's attacking Sins in the morning. A buddy of mine was in G Company. I hadn't seen him since the States, and he said he was going to have to be Superman to survive. And 2 days later, he was missing. It was a really sad day for me, and it's almost as much as when I went to see his mother after the war. Saw the first sergeant. He sent me up to see Parback, who was now our platoon leader. Our lieutenant was wounded, and he said, "Well, you're going to be a messenger for the 2nd platoon." I'm in the 1st platoon, so I don't know where they went. Then when the 2nd platoon went up there, and in the middle of the night, the battle started, and we could hear the swish, swish, swish of the artillery over our heads, announcing the start. Germans returned to fire, and a little shrapnel came around here, and Lieutenant I was supposed to guide, I said there's shrapnel dropping near us. He said, well, we can't stay here. So I said, well, I think I know where there's some holes. So I led them. Forgot to tell you, it started raining. It's pitch black. You know how it is in the raining, pitch black at night in the woods. So we wandered up and we found a hole. And I found it actually by falling into the thing. Then we heard in the other hole was an artillery observer. He's saying that G Company's doing in good and sins, but F Company was supposed to get the woods behind it. They got stuck out in the field. So at that point, I got a message from somebody down in Sins. It says, come to the edge of the woods. You see that burnt-out building there? That's where you're supposed to come. So I told the lieutenant, okay, they want us to come. So we started down this hill. Now the rain melted the snow. So when we got near the village and I saw these black boxes on the ground, I said, does that look like mines? I've never seen a mine before. The lieutenant says, yes. So we lined up single file, and I led them right through the minefield into that building. When I got there, the guy who called me says, hey, you weren't supposed to come till tonight. So you can imagine, I just felt I goofed up somehow. But Captain Kaywood, my company commander, was there and said, hey, I brought the 2nd platoon. He doesn't even say anything to me. He turns to the battalion commander and says, I got 4 more machine guns. So they were very happy about this goof up. But think about it, if I'd come at night, we wouldn't have seen the mines. And if it hadn't rained, we wouldn't have seen the mines. Somehow, something was helping us other than just dumb luck to get into that village. How we doing now for time? I could stop there. So that was one of the close calls I had, and that's, so the captain sent me a couple of trips to find out how the 2nd platoon was done. That's when I heard these screaming Mimis coming over. Have you ever heard about screaming Mimis? I didn't know the Germans had rockets, but they were firing rockets at Sins. And all I could was hear this horrible whining, wow, 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 the sound, and this huge explosion. I never heard an explosion of any artillery louder than a bunch of rockets coming down. Sounded to me like there was a giant with 2 railroad tracks wanging them together. That's the way it sounded. So that's one thing, but I got through that, found the 2nd platoon was okay, and then the next day the captain sends me down to find out the 1st platoon. These are my guys. I haven't seen them for 2 days. But there's a road I have to go down. There's like a 2-foot wall. And from there you can see all the way up into the woods where the Germans are. And they're dropping artillery shells on this road. And when the captain says you got to go see how the 1st platoon's doing, you can't say, no, Captain, they're dropping artillery on this show. So I did the best I could. I ran about 20 feet and flopped down by that wall. I waited for the next shell. I got up and did that again. I did it about 6 times. I managed to get past this open place to a house. So now they can't see me. I'm a little safe. But in front of this house are 4 dead Germans. They're covered with blood. It's a horrible sight. My son's a surgeon. I don't even like to watch it on the movies. I'm 19 years old, and this was not only a horrible sight, but it smelled. It was a sickening sweet smell. So I got to get out of here. So I kept going. Eventually I found Sergeant Colvin in the woods. He's in a little log cabin, like 3 logs high, covered with wood. They can't dig in this woods because the water table's too high, so their best protection they had was logs. So I found him, and he said everybody was okay. I didn't bother to go find my guys because that meant, exposing myself some more to get through the woods to find them. So I just went back, same way, the same process, going through the artillery, and got back to see the captain, and he said that's good. So I started to take a break. somebody in the battalion headquarters in this basement says, the Germans are getting ready to attack. Everybody with a rifle upstairs. Well, there's 3 of us there, so we go upstairs. And I went to this next building where I could see, and there's no windows or anything like that. And I'm afraid to look up there because if I can see up there, they can see me. But I looked anyway. And trying to figure out where it's a good place to. I hadn't shot at anybody before, and I didn't know exactly how to do this. But I looked, and I got all ready, and all of a sudden the Germans come pouring out of this woods. But they're not coming at me. They're going over sideways to Sins. At this point, the U.S. artillery just pounded them. It just destroyed that whole attack, and they all retreated. So I breathed a sigh of relief and went back to see the captain. I don't know how much time we have left. I just want to say that we got Sins, but we never got that. There was another battle up in Banholz Woods to try and capture it. That's where my buddy got killed. We got out of there into a reserve area, and while I was there, captain called me in and said he wanted to make me a recon sergeant because he got wounded. So just about as I was saying yes, somebody came to the door and said, Pfc Ridyard, turns out it was a medic. I asked the captain if I had to go. He said, yeah, you gotta go. So I went, and he took me into another building, and I sat there for the longest time. He told me to take my shoes and socks off. And eventually a doctor came, and he checked my feet, and next thing I knew, 2 guys carried me into an ambulance. I had frozen toes for 6 weeks ever since the ride on the trucks. And so that's where I ended up in a hospital. That's the end of my story. Questions?
Where were you at the end of the war, and what were you thinking when it ended?
Okay, that's a good story. Our division ended up in the Ruhr. And I ended up in a little town of Mettmann just outside of Dusseldorf. And while we were there, what we were doing was guarding the Germans. Now I'm guarding the bakery, and some other guys are guarding the butcher shop and the potato warehouse. 3 things, plus there were jeep patrols going out in the farms protecting. So all the Russians and French, they're all prisoners are loose now. And they're after the Germans, so we're now guarding the Germans. So that's what we did. Not for too long a time, because that was the British zone. So they sent us to Czechoslovakia. So I was there for most of the time. And there we had a displaced persons camp, nothing but young German girls there. So this is just heaven for all these GIs anyway. We're protecting them in a camp. They're displaced and they're trying to find it, but their homes are all wrecked, so they had to stay there for quite a while. That's what I did after the war, till the end of the war. But it was, an interesting thing happened in Mettmann on VE Day. Most of the guys got a little inebriated on VE Day. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, so it wasn't a problem. So when the sergeant came early in the morning, about 5:30, he said, would you take an extra guard duty? And this time he sent me to the, I said yes. Sent me to the butcher shop. And early in the morning, 6 o'clock, a little German guy comes up the road, and he said, "Guten Morgen," and for me, I was stunned a little bit. I didn't say anything. Didn't know what to say. And anyway, the next day, the little old guy comes up again. This time I said, "Good morning," and that's when the war ended for me. All the hate that I had, and I really did have a lot, disappeared. And I was healthy, sort of physical, my mind and everything has been good ever since. Now I dream a lot. And those people are still bad as far as I'm concerned, but all the hate went out of my heart. So that was a big improvement for me after the war. The third thing that was good was getting the GI Bill. I lived in Bethlehem. I went to Lehigh for $500 a semester, and on the GI Bill, I got a degree in mechanical engineering. I took 2 courses in aerodynamics from a Hungarian professor. I ended up at NASA, worked in a hypersonic wind tunnel, and I got an aeronautical degree and set myself for the rest of my life. And I met Nancy Liu, was it October 27th at about 7 o'clock at night, 1946. I went to a high school dance. I got to get talked into it because now I'm 21 and she's 16 when I met her. We went together for 3 years and got engaged, and that's when I got my job out of school. Now we've been married for 67 years. Next, a couple of weeks. Story. Where's the replacement speaker?
You still have 6 minutes.
6 minutes.
Can you tell us anything about your NASA days? Were you there during Mercury and Gemini and all that?
Well, I'll tell you about NASA days. I was out of school, and they gave me all the jobs nobody else wanted to do, which was running the wind tunnel. It turns out, actually, yes, we had 11-inch tunnels, so we had very small models. And when I got there, we had to put the model in at one angle of attack, run the wind tunnel. We had to heat up the air because it's expanding so much, it would turn it into liquid air. So we had a heater. It took 2 hours to heat that up, and then we let it soak. By the time we ran, it was 4 hours. We could get 2 runs in one shift. So to get a curve of lift or something, you had to, I don't know how many days you had to run it just to get one curve. But eventually they improved their instrumentation, and we could get a lot of data. The other problem with this nozzle, had a very thin tenth of an inch slit, and it was so hot that it warped. So the Mach number in the tunnel varied with time. So we could only test at one time to be repetitive. But once a guy from Iowa and I redesigned the nozzle, it was another Mach 7 nozzle, but now it's made out of Invar, and it doesn't expand. So we're able to get a lot of data in one run. And eventually they gave us a model, and we put a whole airplane in there, and it was going to be the prototype for the X-15 rocket plane. So that's what I worked on. We got all this data, we sent it to 4 aircraft companies. I got to evaluate the aerodynamics of all 4 companies, and we picked North American. Then they sent their model, and we tested it, and it had some deficiencies, so the boss let me build another model of their thing, modified it some. They had a fairing up front that was making it unstable. So we found out what made sense to do and followed. So then when it was all over, I got to give my first paper ever, top secret, on the aerodynamics of the X-15 rocket plane from 100 miles per hour up to 7 times the speed of sound. And I never saw that paper again. It was top secret. I left there and went to GE after about 6 years. I worked 30 years at GE in the missile department there as an aeronautical engineer. So that's pretty much what happened to me afterward. We now have, 4 children, 7 grandchildren, they're all married, and 6 great-grandchildren. Living happily ever after. Any more questions? My answer's a little long. Come on, 94thers back there. I met these guys yesterday. Today's 94th.
I'll ask
They lost the battle yesterday. Can you imagine that? I show up and they lose the battle.
Lieutenant's fault. There's always so many horror stories that come out of war. Do you have one story that you'd share with us that you remember as being a funny moment for you, either in training or overseas?
All right, now this is a frontline funny, okay? It's different. We're up on this hill looking down on Sins. It's snowing, it's cold, and the message is that Lieutenant Mulehall wants to move the machine gun up on the forward face of the hill where I guess it should be, so you get a good field of fire. None of us want to do it because we have to dig in this frozen ground. So the message is that, all right, we have a section leader. Every 2 machine guns had a section leader. He was coming to see us, but he doesn't know about the sniper. Every time we get out of our hole and go to the gun for guard duty in the daytime, this guy shoots at us, and these bullets went within inches of him every time, and it was like nothing. We just did it because we knew he wasn't fast enough to get us. We get out of the hole and run to the machine gun hole. I don't mean run. We crawled and flew over there. Anyway, that was dangerous, but Tornfeld doesn't know it, and he's coming up through the woods, so we're watching for him, and finally he shows up with the, get down, get down, get down. Tornfeld comes running, and he does a belly flopper with his face over the hole, big smile. Lieutenant Mulehole got shot. We don't have to move the gun. Foxhole humor. He just got wounded in the arm. So that's the funny story. It's the best I can do.
Did you have any encounters with any of the famous generals that we hear about, Bradley or Patton or any of these guys?
Well, only after the war. He reviewed our division in Czechoslovakia, gave a little talk. One of those talks that I think got him in trouble. But, so that was nice. Yeah, we saw him from a distance. Any other questions? Okay, you had your chance.
Pick your brain later about uniforms and equipment.
What's that?
We'll pick your brain later after all this is done. We'll argue some more.
Well, we can tell you a little bit about what we wore up there. We wore long johns, of course, GI underwear under that. We had the woolen trousers, woolen shirt. I still have my shirt. We had the sweater. One of the guys back there has one of the sweaters. I still have my sweater. And then we had the field jacket. On top of that, we had this really heavy coat. The scarf, which I still have. Now my mother made a balaclava helmet. That's a ski mask to you. So I had that, and then on my feet I have. We had a woolen cap underneath our helmets. Okay. Then on our feet I always had 2 pairs of socks. One my mother knitted, and she knitted the hat as well. And 2 pairs of socks under your shirt. So every night since you get a change, you've got to change those because your feet get sweaty and they lose their insulation. So you switch these socks, but you never get to wash them. So it's the little process of going back and forth. It gets a little smelly. But outside of that one shower, I told you, I never had another one.
Do you still own the socks?
No, I don't. You know, I think I wore those out. The only things I have are the 3 things: the shirt, the scarf, and the sweater. I wear everything else out. But you can get all this stuff at the front. There's 3 websites on it. You really want this stuff. It should have been over a long time ago. It's interesting about the frostbite. It was mostly my toes, but my big toes were numb for a year after the war. I applied to the VA, and they said they saw no service-related injuries. But that wasn't the real problem. I had trench mouth as well, and that was bad. And I got in Czechoslovakia, I got first the guy cleaned it with arsenic. Cleaned your teeth, and then when I got there, I got penicillin. Boom, it went away. But I had some gum damage. Again, not service-related according to the VA back then. I don't want to knock the VA because I go to VA now. They're up in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. They're a real outfit. They're great. Yeah. Okay.